I want to start with something that sounds impossible until you have watched it happen to people just like you. There are savers alive today in modern countries with banks and rules and deposit insurance and everything that is supposed to make money safe, who did everything right their whole lives and then woke up one morning to find that the money in their account was still there on the screen, but they simply could not have it. Not frozen for a day, not delayed, trapped. And what gold has been doing lately is not really about gold at all. It is a warning. And the warning is aimed straight at every saver who thinks the number in their account is the same thing as safety. If you are retired or close to it, and the bulk of what you have sits in a bank account, a money market, a pile of paper promises that all depend on one system staying honest, then I am talking to you specifically. This is not a story about traders or speculators or people gambling on the next hot thing. This is a story about ordinary, careful, responsible savers, the most careful people in any country, and what happened to them when the trust underneath their savings quietly broke. By the time this is over, you will understand exactly what gold just told us, why the people who profit from your confidence do not want you thinking about it, and what the calmest, most reasonable savers are quietly doing about it right now. So let me give you the first piece of it up front, because you have earned that. Here is the thing almost nobody explains. The money in your bank account is not your money in the way you think it is. Legally, a deposit is a loan. You have lent your money to the bank, and in return, you hold a promise to be paid back. On a normal day, that promise is as good as cash. But a promise is only ever as good as the trust behind it, and trust is the one thing that can vanish overnight, while the numbers on the screen sit perfectly still. Gold does not carry that promise. Gold is not somebody else's obligation to you, and that single difference is the whole story. Now let me tell you where I have seen this play out. Not in some dusty history book from a century ago, but in this decade, to people who are still alive and still angry about it. I want you to think about the savers in Lebanon. For years, putting your money in a Lebanese bank was considered the smart, conservative, boring thing to do. People kept their life savings there. Many of them kept those savings in dollars, specifically because they trusted the dollar more than their own currency, and they thought that made them safe. They were the responsible ones. They were the savers who never gambled. And then, over the course of a few short years, the trust broke. The banks, quietly at first, and then openly, stopped letting people take out their own money. There was no vote, no warning, no headline that gave anyone time to act. Depositors would go to withdraw their savings and be told they could only have a trickle of it at a rate the bank decided, in a currency that was worth a fraction of what it had been. People who had hundreds of thousands saved found they could not reach it to pay for medicine, for a wedding, for a funeral. The money existed on paper, it just was not theirs to use anymore. Some of them are still fighting to this day to get out what was supposedly guaranteed. And I want you to sit with what that actually felt like, because that feeling is the whole point of this video. Imagine a man who did everything the careful way. He never speculated, he never chased anything. He saved patiently for decades so that his family would never have to worry. And then he sits at a kitchen table, staring at a bank statement that still shows a large number, knowing that the number is a ghost. He is not poor because he was reckless. He is poor because he trusted the one institution everyone told him to trust. That is not a gambler story. That is a saver story. That is your story if the trust ever breaks here. Now look at Turkey in the same decade, because it shows you the other way this happens, the quieter way, the way that does not even need a locked door. In Turkey, the savers did not necessarily have their accounts frozen. What happened to them was in some ways worse, because it was invisible. Their currency lost its value year after year after year. The number in their account stayed the same, or even grew a little, and yet what that money could actually buy shrank and shrank and shrank. A lifetime of savings did not get taken in one dramatic moment. It got quietly hollowed out from the inside, while everyone kept telling people to stay calm and keep their money in the bank. And the ones who suffered most were, once again, the savers, the people who played by the rules, the people who kept their wealth in the currency and the accounts they were told to trust. Here is what I need you to understand about both of their stories and why they matter to an American retiree who feels very far away from Beirut or Istanbul. In every single case, the wealth that survived was the wealth that was not somebody else's promise. The families who had held some real, physical wealth outside the banking system, wealth that did not depend on a bank honoring an obligation or a government defending a currency, those families kept their footing. Gold does not default. Gold does not freeze your account. Gold is not a loan to anyone. When trust in the paper broke, the thing with no counterparty was the thing that held. That is not a theory. That is what savers in more than one country learned the hard way in living memory. And this is exactly the point where I have to be honest with you about who profits from you never hearing this clearly. The big banks, the financial media, the comfortable voices on the business channels, they have every reason in the world to keep you feeling that your deposit is the same as safety, because your deposit is their raw material. They lend it, they lever it, they earn on it. A saver who understands that a deposit is a loan and who moves even a portion of his wealth into something that is no one's promise is a saver they cannot use as easily. So they do not lie to you exactly. They just never make this simple, and they let you assume that what happened over there could never happen here. Keep watching, because in a few minutes, I am going to show you the one signal that tells you the smart money already disagrees with them. Let me pause here, because this is the moment to give you something practical, since you have stayed with me through the hard part. If you are watching this and you have $100,000 or more in a 401k or an IRA, and part of what I have described is starting to land, there is something you should know that the people managing your money rarely mention. Central banks, the most powerful and best informed buyers of anything on this earth, have been buying gold at a record pace, adding more than 1,000 tons a year for 3 years running, roughly double what they bought in the decade before. They are doing exactly what those surviving savers did on a national scale. And here is the part that matters to you. There is a perfectly legal, perfectly ordinary way for a regular retiree to do the very same thing inside the retirement account you already have by moving a portion of it into physical gold and silver without triggering taxes or penalties. It is called a self-directed precious metals IRA, and it is not some exotic loophole for insiders. If you have 100,000 or more in any retirement account, this is for you. I put together a free guide that walks through exactly how it works. If you are watching this on your TV, just scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to jeffreedguide.com. Take a look and then come right back, because the next part is where this really comes together. Now, let me answer the question you are probably asking, which is fair and important. If nothing like Lebanon or Turkey has happened here, why is gold sending a warning now? And why should a saver in America take it seriously? And the answer is in the behavior of the people who never panic. Look at what the central banks are doing, and more importantly, look at when they started doing it in earnest. The buying accelerated sharply after the world watched one major power have its foreign reserves frozen by other countries. Reserves that were considered rock solid, held in the safest paper instruments in the world, were made unreachable, more or less overnight. And every central bank on earth quietly drew the same lesson a Lebanese depositor learned at his kitchen table. Wealth that is somebody else's promise can be taken or trapped when the trust breaks. Gold sitting in your own vault cannot be frozen by another country. So the buying began, and it has not stopped, and it does not care what the price is, because they are not chasing a profit. They are buying an exit from other people's promises. And this is where I ask you to really wake up, because it changes everything about how you should read what gold is doing. There is a milestone most people never heard about. Gold has now overtaken the euro to become the second largest reserve asset held by central banks anywhere in the world, sitting behind only the US dollar. Think about what that means. The most conservative institutions on the planet, the ones whose entire job is to not be wrong, have been quietly rebuilding their savings around the one asset that is no one's liability. They are not doing it because gold pays interest, because it does not. They are doing it for exactly the reason those surviving savers held it. Because when the promises fail, the thing that is not a promise is the thing that is left standing. And notice how little comfort you are being offered from the people whose job is to steady the ship. The Fed's latest decision, made under the current chair, Kevin Warsh, was a hold, but it came out of a deeply divided room. Policymakers openly split, some of them pushing hard in the other direction, a real fight over which danger is worse. I am not going to hand you a rate number or pretend to predict the next move, because that is exactly the day-to-day noise that ages and that the trading desks want you fixated on. The point is bigger than any single meeting. When the very people steering the currency cannot agree among themselves, that is not a reason to feel more secure about leaving everything you have inside their promises. It is a reason to ask, quietly, how much of your future you want riding on a debate you do not get a vote in. There is one more piece of this that I find almost impossible to ignore, and it is the part the financial channels cannot explain to you, so they mostly just stop talking about it. For most of modern history, gold followed a simple rule. When you could earn a real return on safe paper, gold would fall, because who wants to hold something that pays nothing when the bond pays you to wait? A bond that pays a genuine real return has always been gold's only true enemy. And yet recently, that rule broke. Gold has climbed even while those real returns stayed high, which is not supposed to happen. When a relationship that held for decades suddenly stops working, it is telling you that something underneath has changed. What changed is trust. The market is no longer just weighing interest against no interest. It is weighing a promise against no promise, and quietly deciding that the promise is not as safe as everyone assumes. Now, I want to be very careful and very honest with you, because the people who actually deserve your trust are the ones who tell you the limits of their own case. What I am describing is a case, not a guarantee, and it is not personal financial advice. Gold can and does fall, sometimes hard and fast, even in the middle of a long rise. History is full of it. There was a year when the Fed merely hinted it might slow its support that gold dropped by something close to 30% in a matter of months, and nothing about the deeper story had actually changed. The metal can be shaken violently, while the reason to own it stays completely intact. So, if you take anything practical from me, take this. Own the real thing, not a paper claim on it. Size your position so that a sharp drop can never force you to sell at the worst possible moment. And whatever you do not sell into the shakeout, because the shakeout is exactly where the careful get separated from the metal by people who understand this better than they do. Let me also say plainly what the warning is not, so you do not walk away frightened in the wrong direction. I am not telling you that American banks are about to lock their doors tomorrow. I am not predicting a date, and anyone who does is selling you fear. What I am telling you is subtler, and in a way more important. The warning is that the assumption underneath your entire retirement, the assumption that a number in an account is the same as wealth you truly control, is exactly the assumption that failed the savers in Lebanon and quietly betrayed the savers in Turkey. It is an assumption, not a law of nature. And the whole value of understanding this now, while everything here still feels calm and normal, is that the time to think clearly about it is precisely when you do not feel forced to. Because here is what almost nobody will tell you, and it is the part one I've been saving for you. You are early. That is not flattery, it is just where we are. The central banks already see this. They have been positioning for years. The smart money already understands that a deposit is a promise and that promises can break, and it has already been moving, quietly, without an announcement. But the mainstream has not caught on. Your neighbors have not caught on. The pension funds and the financial media and the comfortable advisors who tell everyone to just stay the course have not caught on. And that is the opportunity. Because by the time this is obvious, by the time it leads every news segment and every advisor is suddenly recommending it, the easy part will already be behind us. The best moment to act on a warning is always the moment when it still feels unnecessary. Nobody is going to call you and tell you the trust is breaking. Nobody sends you an invitation. By the time they ring the bell, the room is already full. So think about your own position honestly, the way that careful man at his kitchen table wishes he had, while everything still looked fine. How much of what you have is really yours, free and clear, no counterparty, no promise, nothing that can be frozen or quietly hollowed out? For most retirees I talk to, the honest answer is almost none of it. Every dollar is a promise from someone, the bank, the fund, the government, the currency itself. That is not a reason to panic. It is a reason to bring the balance back towards center, to own some portion of your wealth as a thing rather than a promise, so that whatever happens to the trust in the system, a piece of what you built is beyond its reach. And that brings me to the last thing I want to offer you. For those of you who stayed all the way through this, because you are exactly the kind of careful person this matters most to. If you have $100,000 or more in your retirement savings, I would like to give you something more than a video. My team holds a free one-on-one educational web conference for people in exactly your situation, where we walk through your own picture, how a precious metals IRA actually works, and whether moving a portion of your savings into physical gold and silver makes sense for you specifically. There is no cost and no obligation. Just mention that you watched this all the way to the end. And let me give you the honest reason to do it now rather than someday. It is not because there is a deadline, because there is not one. It is because the only time a decision like this is calm, cheap, and fully in your control is when nothing feels urgent. Once it does, the choice gets made for you, and it gets made on worse terms. If you are watching this on your TV, scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to jeffreedguide.com. So let me bring us all the way back to where we started, to that saver staring at a statement that still showed a big number that was no longer really his. That is what gold just sent a warning about. Not a price, not a forecast, a warning about the difference between a number and true ownership, between a promise and a thing, between wealth you can see and wealth you actually control. The savers who learned that difference too late learned it in the cruelest way. You are hearing it while the sun is still out and the doors are still open and nothing is forcing your hand. That is the gift of being early. What you do with it is yours to decide, calmly on your own terms, which is the one luxury those other savers never got. Do not waste the quiet.